A knight or a chevalier was a man who served in the cavalry during the Middle Ages. Besides being brave, a knight had to lead a life of chivalry. His job was to fight the enemies of his lord. A knight was willing to shed blood to protect his community and church. Knighthood to these men was its own way of life. Throughout the Middle Ages, knights were commonly used in war. About a third of the medieval army up until the 13th century were mounted knights. A knight's equipment was meant to help offensively and defensively. Of course, the knight's biggest weapon was his sword. To the knight, the sword was a special piece that symbolized his life and honor. As the Middle Ages progressed, the knight armor got more complex. More was added on. Defensive armor consisted of neck and head covers, elbow pieces, knee guards, and helmets. As gear progressed, knight armor became more and more protective, but gained much more weight. Here you can see how knight armor progressed through some of the Middle Ages. In war, if any combatant was hurt, including knights, they had to forage for themselves as medical services rarely existed. When a knight was dismounted, they were at a serious disadvantage. To be successful in war, the knight's warhorse needed to be strong and powerful in order to carry a steel-clad knight into battle, so it was bred deliberately for size and strength, and required long and careful training to sustain clash of battle. These types of horses were very rare and expensive to get. The Arabian strain was popular among warhorses, but the white stallion was the most prized warhorse you could find. When in battle, the knight guided his horse by spurring, pressuring the leg, and shifting his weight. Around the year 1200, the church took over the knighting ceremony. They imposed their rituals into the ceremony, seemingly making it a sacrament. The candidate took its symbolic bath, wore clean white clothes and a red robe, and sat for 10 hours in prayer at the altar, where his weapons and armor lay. A ceremony was then held, and the priest blessed all his equipment, and the candidate took an oath that stated he would protect the church against any enemies. The candidate was then proclaimed a knight, and his spurs were placed, and he was given his sword and shield. Celebrations were later held where many other knights attended.
In medieval war, the battleground was typically centered around the castle. The castle was designed to be ready for attacking enemies. Medieval castles always had watchtowers to stay alert and could easily assemble an army if need be. The castle was typically surrounded by a moat. To get through the castle walls was a difficult task, so enemies would use battering rams or catapults. Some even had miners that would dig under the moat, and explosives were used to destroy the support below the walls. Another strategy used to attack an enemy castle was building a wooden tower with wheels that was just the same height as the wall. In the tower were a group of combatants who easily accessed the castle interior. This strategy was used by Christians in the First Crusade in order to take the Holy Land.
The Crusades began in response to a call for help from the Byzantine Emperor to the Roman Pope Urban II. The Pope proclaimed that the chief goal was to reclaim the Holy Land. When Pope Urban announced the First Crusade, a popular rallying cry amongst the Christians were Dieu le veut, or God wills it, and became a typical battle cry.
God wills it!
The First Crusade was primarily led by Frankish noblemen who led the attack to ransack and then capture the Holy Land, Jerusalem. When the Christians overtook Muslim cities like Antioch on its way to Jerusalem, they would capture the Muslim people and torture and execute them. On June 7, 1099, the Christian army first stood at the walls of Jerusalem. They entered the city and brutally murdered the inhabitants. The Christians began to build castles and accustom themselves to Arabic culture. Strongholds were constructed all over, and Christians had powerful control. The Second Crusade began in response to the capture of the Christian county Edessa by the Turks. This wave turned out to be a failure for the Christians as they were defeated by the Turks. This Christian defeat somewhat influenced the recapture of Jerusalem in 1187 as their control began to weaken. This event then led to the Third Crusade. This crusade's goal was to recapture Jerusalem, but they were only able to seize control of Acre and Jaffa. This crusade was unable to regain control of Jerusalem and ultimately failed. This then led to the Fourth Crusade, who shared the same goal as the Third. To earn transportation to the Holy Land, this crusade agreed with the Venetians to overtake Zara, a Catholic city. When Zara was taken over, this crusade against Christians began. The Crusade then agreed with Byzantine Prince Alexios Angelos to make his father the Byzantine Emperor again in return for Byzantine support in their journey to the Holy Land. In April of 1204, Constantinople, the Byzantine capital, was taken over by the Fourth Crusade. Much of the Fourth Crusade never reached Jerusalem, and many knights left Jerusalem for Constantinople. The Fourth Crusade was a complete disaster that turned the Crusaders against the Christian city Constantinople, failed to even reach the Holy Land, and weakened the Byzantine Empire. The 5 subsequent crusades all failed in recapturing the Holy Land, and by 1291 all Christian strongholds in the Middle East had been retaken by the Muslims. After the Crusades, Eastern and Western Europe began trading with one another as Eastern products became popular in the West and vice versa. Europe's economy was stimulated by the growth in trade, and the newfound systems of banking and credit helped grow the economy. After the Crusades and the involvement in Arabic culture, Western Europe replaced the Roman numbering systems with Arabic numerals. The Crusades gave way for a heroic ideal that was seen in literature and poetry throughout Europe.